Colin, great for you to be joining us, Abel. So you're client partner at Foremost, and you're working with major financial institutions on data and transformation. And you've also found time to co-found the Business AI Alliance to give directions for SMEs and mid-market firms, a voice on AI. So clearly incredibly busy, and you've seen the view from both ends. So how far ahead are these big organizations versus those that you represent at the Alliance in terms of AI adoption?
Yeah, I mean, first thing to be aware of, the Business AI Alliance, it's a community of AI experts. So when we're comparing my day job within financial services to the community, within that community, there's service companies, there's product companies, there's actually some banks in there. There's a whole plethora of different types of sectoral focuses and individuals involved. But basically, they're all AI experts. So within their organizations, they're either building products as a product company or services as a service company and building them in AI. Then there are other organizations who maybe don't specifically focus on AI, and they might be some of the banks, and some of their champions from those organizations are part of this community. So they've got this kind of peer network where they can sort of ask questions, get some answers, because as you all know, it's a very fast-paced environment. I think obviously the bigger organizations in the sector, they're throwing a lot of money at AI. There's no doubt about it. It's probably the number one priority for all the big banks, and some of the smaller organizations. I think everyone's at a different place. They may say it's their strategy, but a lot of the time it's perhaps not their strategy. They've not come out wholeheartedly and said AI is part of our strategy, but they're thinking about it, and they're just needing a little helping hand along the way. Some organizations are like that. Others are obviously a lot more mature and really embracing it. Don't know if that
What would you
answers your
say is the
question.
proportion of those that are really mature and those that are finding their way and starting out?
So in financial services, if we focus on that sector, definitely the neobanks, and I call the neobanks are probably your sort of digital banks, your Starlings, your Monzos, your Atom banks. And they're definitely more mature. And the reason they're more mature is they've got the infrastructure in place, they've got the ways of working. So they're effectively a little bit more nimble about how they operate. They've not got bogged down with a legacy. So they've kind of got a lot of the building blocks in place. The way they organize themselves internally is probably a little bit more aligned to how you would build products and roll them out quickly, experiment quickly, but they've got cloud, they've got all the latest technology. So they're a lot more set up. So that's one distinction. Then you've got some of the challenger banks and building societies. So some of them are going through digital transformations themselves. And as part of that, they'll be putting the building blocks, the cloud provision into the banks, the digital services, but they're not quite as mature, and they're probably going to have to go through a sort of big change, transformational changes with the ways of working as well within those companies. So they're probably a little bit behind, but obviously once they've got those building blocks in place, they'll be at a point where they can start evolving their estates. But every organization is different because it's all really down to the energy of the board, the focus of the board, whether they're going to be driving it, and actually whether the individuals have time in their busy day jobs to start to experiment with AI as well. And I think everyone's in completely different places. I talk to a lot of the challenger banks at the moment. Everyone's in completely different places, actually. It's quite interesting.
In terms of the firms you represent in the alliance, you mentioned how the pace of change with AI is fast moving. So
Yeah.
are they finding that the gap is widening as they're still thinking about where to move forward?
So again, the SMEs and the community, this Business AI Alliance, is a whole different selection of companies. So the small businesses in there are, they're building products using AI. They live and breathe AI every day, and they're building services and products to take to their customers. Is there a big gap? I think the gap's probably not as big as everyone thinks, because if I look at the last 3.5 years since generative AI came along, probably in the last 12 months, most organizations rolled out products like Copilot to their employees. I would say there's a lot of familiarization across most organizations with what to do with AI, and people are just experimenting and trying to understand where do we have some opportunities or challenges that we would like to address through the application of AI? But if you think about it, it's never going to be scalable at this point in time. The employees who are using AI to support them on their day-to-day jobs, first of all, have to make the time to learn it. Secondly, they have to have curious minds to actually give it a go. Then thirdly, going back to the point earlier, if they're going to scale it, they need to have the building blocks in place in the organization to do so. But last year was definitely experimentation, getting used to Gen AI, starting to think about the use cases. This year, I would imagine in the sector, it's all about what the MVPs, minimum viable products, that we can start to focus on. So the ones with the highest value that we really want to try and industrialize. So we've filtered out all the noise. People have kind of got used to it now. And it's right, okay, here's 2 or 3 great ideas we want to take forward because we see that would bring us the best value. So I think that this year is where we're moving into. It's more that, and probably moving into next year's then, as long as the organizations have all their technology, data, and operation model in place, then how do we start scaling that? So that's the kind of way I'm seeing the market happening. But they're all working at the same pace because they're all Gen AI only came out at the same time, and they're all just adopting the uses of Gen AI through Copilot, etc., at the same time as well. So it's very much everyone's just lifting their knowledge base and experience at the same time.
I mean, you spent 30 years. Am I okay in sort of saying 30 years? So you've certainly got a lot of experience in that area. So you're finding as firms are moving forward in looking at how they can make best use of AI, they're having conversations with you about data quality and governance. I mean, surely that's something that should come up first, or is it often something comes up afterwards and they realize, hang on, things aren't working as we thought they should?
Yes, I think like when people are experimenting, they're obviously finding that the data is, I mean, AI is nothing without the data. I think anyone who's been using it will understand it. A lot of organizations, though, they've obviously going through their own digital transformations and data transformation, and even in the financial services sector, regulation has driven a lot of focus on data as well, and all the governance and controls that goes with it. AI is just another lens, really, on top of all the other programs of work that are going on within an organization. So, but it is hugely important. But I think it's been hugely important for most organizations for many years now. You know, without good data, they're unable to interact properly with their customers, personalize their services and products, answer the questions that the regulators are always asking, and basically ensuring that they don't have what they're called in financial services Section 116s around data irregularities and reporting irregularities. So data quality has always been a big thing, certainly over the last 10, 15 years. Prior to the crash, probably there's a little bit of grayness there about quality of data. I don't think we fully understood it at that point, though.
Yeah, so it's not really a genuinely new challenge with data evidence. It's something that's just been made far more urgent.
Exactly. It's definitely AI is accelerating it. Those organizations that are embracing AI and want to drive AI within their companies at a pace to keep 100%, it's accelerating the need to get the right governance around their data and transparency and trust in the data that you're using.
And going back to the first question I mentioned, you know, you've got a role in both camps, working with large financial organizations and then also with mid-market and SMEs in the alliance. You know, when it comes to the bigger established financial services firms, you know, they know that they can't just deploy AI and hope it works. There's too much at stake. But then you have a lot of mid-market firms in other sectors basically doing exactly that. What should they be testing before it goes live?
Yeah. So that's a interesting question. I don't work in non-financial services sectors. I think it's more considering the outcomes. So if you're going to be pushing out solutions to your customers or even internally, who owns the outcome? Who's signing off the ongoing use of that outcome? So what if something goes wrong? Who's accountable for that? And what happens if you've pushed out a solution to customers and something goes wrong, which erodes value? What remedial activities do you put in place? So it's all about ownership. And understanding what to do if something goes wrong. Don't just push something out without considering it all. I guess that's probably for me one of the things to be thinking about. I guess when you work for a small business, a startup, scale-up organization building products and services, you tend not to think like that. And I'm assuming it'll be perhaps similar in unregulated sectors. You're just excited about the technology. You just want to push things out to your customers and deal with the fallout later. But if you're working in a regulated environment, you can't obviously do that. It's a very different ball game. But I guess that, yeah, focus on your customers and what your remediation activities will be and who's going to own that remedial activity. And probably the public affairs that will come off the back of it if you need to apologise to any customers. So, what is that process?
So, I mean, you mentioned this year for members of the Alliance, it's going to be a big year, 2026, moving forward with MVPs. Do you think up till now that this concern about data and governance, or particularly governance, has perhaps given them an excuse not to move forward quicker? Do you think that's had an impact?
I don't believe so anymore. I think there was a small moment in time when certainly Gen AI was released that possibly, but that was just a lack of understanding of what it was and people weren't experimenting enough. I think now it's just such a big focus. The board sets out the mandate, the CRO aligns to the mandate, and they have to make it happen. It's as simple as that. They own the risks. So, but the board is going to want AI or a strategy around AI, so they need to support it. So I generally don't think there's any inhibitors anymore when it comes to risk functions, certainly in financial services that I've come across anyway. And these are just based on the customers I deal with. There might be organizations out there that are, but I've certainly not come across them.
Yeah, we were talking to one operator that was saying that how they develop agents in line with what their business needs, and then they roll it out through their existing Microsoft stack. Because they operate in a regulated environment, data sensitivities are very important. That's the way that they've been able to move forward quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we work in the financial services space. We work on model risk management. I don't know if you've heard of that before. How do you manage the risk of the models that you're rolling out, and how do you validate the models, accuracy, etc. So that sort of second line validation is within all banks at the moment. The big focus on how do you validate generative AI models. It's very much a black box as well. So there's different methodologies that needs to apply when doing your model validation. So you're comfortable with what you're going to be releasing either internally, externally. So model risk management's generative AI model risk management's become very much a growing concern now in financial services.
I know that a lot of platforms are trying to make that easier for firms to understand and implement and manage. Do you find this is getting more complex, or is it getting easier from your perspective?
I think the technology is making things easier. If you go back to my point, there's so many fantastic products out there now, and the challenge is how do we get our legacy data environments into this modern technology and start utilizing the tools that sort of sit off the back of it? Because if you were building greenfield, and you used the modern tech stack that come from a lot of the cloud providers and all the supporting providers, you'll be in a pretty good place because you'll get a lot of governance by design straight out the box if you build your data pipelines effectively. So technology is phenomenal now, but most organizations have technical debt and legacies, and it's trying to get how do we move them from an on-premise platform to a cloud platform, and not just onto a cloud platform, but into new technologies and upskill our people as well at the same time. There's a lot of nuance to it, but if you start at greenfield, the technology is phenomenal. Yeah, I think there are the governance around them if you use them properly. It's all there to be capitalized on.
And just as an offshoot of that, are there any firms that you've worked with that got this right, were moving forward a lot quicker than, say, other firms you've worked with? And was there any sort of characteristics and traits that kind of contributed to that progress?
Probably a few answers to this one. I think like the tier one banks, if I look at these are the large like regional banks in the UK, for example. There was one in particular that I was working with. I've worked with most of the big banks in the UK, but one in particular had in effect put the building blocks in place, ways of working in place, innovation functions in place, had been experimenting for quite a number of years, but they'd been very focused on scaling. And when Gen AI came out, they were effectively ready. They're ready to go. So I thought, I believe it, I might be wrong in other banks. I can't name who it is, who I'm thinking about, but other banks might think differently. But they were very much able to start building things quickly and getting that rolled out to, let's say they started internally, because most banks focus on internal process improvements. But they were just ready and good to go. I did talk about it earlier. I think it's all about going back to the point again, operating model, technology, data, governance. If you get all those four ingredients right and they're in place, you can just start quicker. It's as simple as that.
I mean, there's lots of lessons for mid-market firms to take from this in terms of the approach, getting your foundations right in advance. And unfortunately, probably weren't in the same position that a lot of larger financial organizations were. So perhaps conversations that might have stalled progress would have been sort of the budget or talent shortages that they might have had from the get-go. Do you see that may have held them back initially? Where are they now in terms of progress?
Again, everyone's at a different stage. Some organizations perhaps have a fairly straightforward business models where technology perhaps at this point in time isn't their number one priority. They've got a more relationship led service, so technology is not really the answer to them, so they're sort of slowly drifting into it rather than we need to do something about it. Then you've got the organizations, challenger banks, small banks that have got a bit of legacy behind them. They want to be more digital, but the truth of the matter is they've got quite a lot of change stack on their agenda already. So you're just adding an AI as another layer of complexity to it. It can be quite challenging. I don't think the talent's the problem. I think it's the time. Big organizations have the investment to throw lots of money and build innovation teams, whereas small banks kind of don't. So you're really reliant on sort of pressing on challengers across a smaller organization to sort of start to experiment, perhaps even in their own time a little bit, or trying to find time in their day jobs to start experimenting and get their head around it. But when you're busy already, it's quite challenging. So I think that's possibly the inhibitor. Some organizations who are smaller, they'll go, right, this is important. We're going to set up a team and we're going to invest in it and we're going to get on with it. So, but everyone's at kind of completely different parts in their journey, and they've all got different reasons for where they are as well.
You said it yourself, a lot of firms have teams that are already very busy. We've seen this with other operators that we've been speaking to, that they've been hiring obviously technical prerequisites. You've got to get those in, but it's also hiring people with the curiosity and fascination with AI
Yeah.
and how that can take them. Adds that extra motivation that they need.
I think it's the curious mind. It's innovative thinking. I think there's a lot of, this it's part of the Business AI Alliance. When we started engaging government, first of all, it was about the government was really being led a lot by the big tech providers and the big corporates, and the SME wanted a voice. So we were kind of a convening entity into government around that. But secondly, the mood music was pretty negative. It's all about job erosion and security, etc., data privacy, and actually impact on the planet because of energy costs, etc. Right? So it's quite negative. There's a lot of negative mood music around it. But I think organizations are the same. It's like you've got people who've been doing a similar job for year after year. They're pretty busy. They're a bit scared by technology, and they don't really know what to do next. Do they plunge in? Do they just ignore it and pretend it's not happening? Or I don't know what the next step would be. My feel is they've got to actually lean in and try and understand what's going on here. Technology actually is, we all probably now experiment with ChatGPT. It's built into our browsers and phones now. Everyone's getting used to it. But actually, when you're building solutions, it's pretty easy to build a solution because you don't need to be a software engineer to build them. Generative AI can build you maybe not production ready solutions, but allow you to experiment pretty quickly if you've got the right technology and you've got the right creative and curious mindset, to be perfectly honest. I think that's just where it's at. And a lot of organizations, be surprised, most companies have a very small number of curious mindsets, and the rest people are just getting on with their day jobs. But I think that's going to have to change. I think for people to adapt to the pretty fast changing world that AI is creating.
You mentioned using ChatGPT. It's built into our phones. It's on a browser. A lot of organizations we speak to struggle to move beyond surface level change. It's saved time, but has it actually changed what we do operationally? It seems like a much bigger question that a lot of mid-markets and SMEs are struggling with. Would you agree with that?
Proof of concepts are great. Gets everyone understanding the technology, but moving to an operational state is different. It's first of all, and I've talked about this a lot. It's about the building blocks: your op model, your technology, your data, your governance. Secondly, though, it's about there's a lot of you need to start thinking about how you interact with the foundation models that you're effectively building solutions for. It's not just a case of out the box, put a prompt into an agentic workflow and it's going to give you the answer. There's actually a lot of customization that needs to go on. So that's when you start to get a lot more technical. If you're really looking to customize your outcomes that and to give you that trust and transparency that something in an operational model would 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 require. So that is the big jump, and that I think is where a lot of organizations are struggling. You do need to start to get expertise who understand how to sort of construct the models that will give you the right answers. Because there's a lot of hallucinations, as we know, when you put in a prompt on ChatGPT, it will give you an answer, but also give you go and double check the answer. We've got it here, and it might not always be right. But that's not the case when you're operationalizing something. It needs to be more or less right all the time. So how do you customize your prompt engineering to ensure that you're getting as close to perfection as possible? And there's a bit of a dark art around that one.
Yeah, you've talked about how there are larger organizations which have a lot of money and investment to throw at the problem, which means getting the right tools in, getting the skills, the staff, wider organizational change. And there's organizations which are struggling with, the time to actually operationalize that and make deeper changes. Just to seek from that, do you think the vendors have a role to play here? Obviously, we get, a lot of organizations that we talk to have vendors contacting them all the time. It can be hard to work that out. But is there a role that they could potentially play to help?
Yeah, I think vendors are already. Obviously, the hyperscalers, the big cloud platform providers, they throw lots of free credit and support at organizations. So that is already there. And I think smaller firms are always who are building their own products are always super keen to come in and work with clients. One, because they obviously want to sell their products, but two, they want to make sure they build their products on real challenges and real data. That's the same. That's been the same with fintechs. But the challenge with the second one, though, for a lot of the small businesses, of which the part of the Business AI Alliance, it's all fair and well coming in, letting an organization come in and work with you. The bank perhaps will walk away with lots of great insights, but actually the organization you've been working with might not have a contract at the end of it. And that does happen a lot, but it's been happening for many years, as I said, in the fintech space. So yeah, so I don't think it's going to change. I think small businesses are always going to want to interact with customers so they can fine tune their products and maybe co-invest, and maybe that organization won't buy the product, but they will be able to sell it somewhere else because they've fine-tuned what they're trying to sell. So it does work, but just having a fair and transparent relationship with these organizations. But yeah, look, the vendors are pretty much aligned and supporting, in my opinion. They probably can do a lot more. But there definitely seems to be a lot of investment behind it.
I guess it's asking the right questions, isn't it? How does this plug into my stack? Will you provide the relevant training? It's getting those questions out in advance to know,
Exactly.
and also having the contract at the end of it, as you referenced.
Yes, for the smaller firms, correct. And then for the bigger ones, they as I said, they do throw a lot of free credit organizations, especially the larger banks, I would imagine.
Okay, so most mid-market firms know how to justify, say, a new hire or a software purchase, but AI often doesn't fit neatly into those categories. From what you're seeing through the alliance and in your role at Foremost, how are the ones making progress really justifying the investment?
Yeah, so I think when you're a service company, the service industry is changing a lot now. I think AI is built into how you deliver outcomes for your clients. So those who are creatively thinking about how they deliver services now are building accelerators and products to complement their deliveries. If you get them right, effectively what happens, the cost to the client will drop. So the client's always going to be cost effective. What's the most cost effective way to deliver? So you're more likely to win the deal if you've got some complementary accelerators and products to run alongside your services. So hopefully you'll win something that way rather than going for a pure service play that's going to be more costly. That's probably the key thing for the service industry. But also what that drives is higher gross margins as well. So you can build that into your outcomes. And I guess once you deliver your higher gross, you might not be hitting the revenue, but you'll be getting higher gross margins. But obviously, for every success, you go and then talk to other clients about it, and then you multiply that. So the service industry is definitely having to adjust to using AI. I think though our clients themselves to justify, I think it's gut feel. To be perfectly honest, a lot of the time they know they want to invest, so they have to just take the plunge at times. It's quite hard to really justify return on investment, certainly in the early days or months, years. But eventually they'll get there. But it is hard, especially you're learning, going through that learning curve. So I think the smaller banks will probably struggle a little bit more with that justification, certainly in the early days.
Yeah, I was going to say when a mid-market firm gets AI right, what's the first thing they notice? Well, the end result is more revenue, more deals won. But before that, there's that you mentioned gut feel. So, what's an indication that they're on the right track before they get to that end result?
So an indication they're on the right track. Well, I suppose they do a lot of experimentation internally first, don't they? So they tend not to push it straight out to the customer. So let's try and streamline some of our own internal processes and then try and qualify what that has saved us in our own costs. So there's already a saving. So I think most customers, certainly in the banking sector, they'll be focusing on their own internal process improvements. And then there will be a justifiable return on that investment eventually. So what took 10 man days is now taking 2 man days or 1 man day. There you go. So you then multiply that across an organization. Of course, at the moment, people are experimenting with Gen AI, so there'll be fairly simple solutions they'll be building for them for their own purposes or their team's purposes, and they're not industrial scale solutions. But actually, if you multiply all them up, there'll be a definite cost benefit in the longer term.
Okay, well, we're coming up to the end of the call. I've got a couple of questions, just a few more questions to add. If a mid-market CEO came to you today and said, look, my team's not ready for AI, it doesn't sound like that's the case. A lot of conversations you're having, but what's the first question you might ask to figure out whether that's actually true or whether it's just an excuse to avoid change?
I think it's going to be down to that. Are they not ready to embrace AI? I mean, again, and the key thing for the UK government is education, to be perfectly honest. Like across the entire SME community, like small business community, the UK government wants all organizations to embrace AI, but the biggest problem is education. And I think AI unfortunately makes a lot of people a little bit uncomfortable about their own futures. So by embracing it, does that mean their futures are going to be compromised? So I think there's an obvious nervousness around it. So I can understand it, but the key thing is it's just educating them. It's taking them on the journey, making them feel part of the journey. Hopefully they'll gain from it and they'll feel like they're contributing to the agenda of the organization. They're innovating. They'll start to stretch themselves out their comfort zones. They'll start to see a little bit of more of a future for how they can apply their experiences with AI. If I think about, you've got like kids coming through today who are just using AI all the time and they're comfortable and they pick up technology quickly. Older generation have been doing jobs, maybe sometimes repetitive jobs, business as usual jobs, and they've not fully embraced the technology because they've never really needed to. But what they've got are all the business problems. And the kids coming through have the technology without the business problems. So it has to kind of meet in the middle somewhere. So just embrace it. I think the chief exec just needs to educate, and there's lots of education programs out there that the government and a lot of our SMEs and the Business AI Alliance are offering as well. So yeah, that's what needs to happen.
That makes sense. Lead from the front, which you've mentioned. Also, you mentioned that those organizations which are focused on relationships are perhaps less focused on AI advancement. But, when they realize that the fact that they can free themselves up from the weeds to spend even more times with the clients, then that
Well,
realization,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
kicks off. Okay, Colin, look, thank you so much for your time today. It's been fascinating to hear from you, and hopefully catch up again very soon.
Thanks very much, Jim.